Hello and welcome. Today we've got John Dowling, and today we are going to be discussing the Israel attacks onto Iran. The treasury bond market is going to collapse, and also some countries have announced, and we're going to tell you in this video, that they are abolishing the petrodollar. This is huge because what does that mean? In my opinion, I think we're going back to gold standard as former President Trump and the 46th President Trump wants to go back to the gold standard. So this is good news. It looks like we're going in the right direction. But obviously, there's a lot of things going on in the media, waking people up, and it's very interesting. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily news reels. John, thank you so much for joining me. How are you, and what have you been up to?
Nicholas, always a pleasure to be here. I'm well. Thanks for having me, as always. It's been, as I think for everybody, a crazy month, trying to keep up with the news cycle on a seemingly hourly, minute-by-minute basis. I was able to visit some family for the Mother's Day period, and that was good. That was refreshing, not too far from you. And just getting back here and wrapping up the month, and I'm very excited about what this summer looks to be bringing.
Absolutely. It's very exciting, especially with all the elections coming up very soon. Is it going to happen or is it not? Are they going to steal it or are they not? There's just so much going on, and it's very interesting. It's very exciting. And please tell us, why don't you tell us what is going on with Israel?
Yeah, so Israel, as we've discussed in previous shows, as you'll recall, Israel plays a pivotal role in this. They've, as you may and your viewers probably are well aware at this point, now that we have had enough time to look back at this month and the previous month, we can assess the situation. Israel has attacked Rafah, Hezbollah, Lebanon, and that's critical because if you recall, Nicholas, back in 2022, Lebanon devalued their pound by 90%. So what that means to the average person is you're going to see a devalue to a revalue. Think of it like flipping a house. You take a house down to the studs and you buy it cheap and you build it up and then you sell it at a much higher price. You've basically completely renovated it. And that's what they're going to be doing with their currency and a lot of many other currencies, as we know. So now Israel's in a pause moment. We're just waiting for them to do their final attack on the secret nuclear Iranian power plants. And when that happens, you'll see a cacophony of events. You will see Iraq revalue or reinstate, to be more precise. You will see XRP. Judge Torres is just awaiting these happenings to render her decision that XRP is a currency and not a security, which we all know. It's a formality at this point, like everything else. So Israel plays a very important role as a catalyst in moving what we're waiting for to come forward.
Interesting. So is this a white hat attack? Is it a black hat attack? What do you think it is?
Oh, I think it's that's a good question. I think it's a God attack in the sense that God is going to use what was meant for evil and turn it for good. So ultimately, I think it's a good guy alliance attack. It's going to look bad to the maelstrom of the general public, but for those of us in the know, it's actually a good thing. And the reason it's a good thing, in case those are wondering, once again, not to be repetitive, but I think this is an important point we don't want to gloss over. The U.S. has signed off, as you know, when Prime Minister Sunani went to America earlier this month. In principle, they signed off, but they're almost daring Iraq to reinstate because they don't think they'll do it, and they don't want them to do it because they hate competition. They want the U.S. dollar to be the king hegemony, but we know that's being pulled apart in every aspect. So Israel represents an important demarcation in that them doing this breaks up the U.S. militias in Iraq. It also breaks up the corrupt Iranian proxy government in Iraq, not unlike what we have in America and throughout the whole of the world.
Interesting, very interesting. So moving forward, you say that the treasury bond market is to collapse. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So similarly to how the US dollar has been the hegemony for the world up until this point, so to have all these countries been investing in treasury bonds, but that's tied to the US dollar, right? That's tied to our Federal Reserve System. So if the dollar's collapsing, the treasury yields are going to collapse. And the only way that it's been propped up is that the Fed has been investing fake money, pumping, artificial, what they call QE, quantitative easing, which is just funny money, just a fancy word for that, into the system to keep it artificially propped up on life support. They were bailing out the debt, but now they're making strong statements in the financial market that they're not going to be doing that going forward in June. And what that means is that you have countries like Japan, who has a tremendous amount of our debt, a lot of countries, China, Zimbabwe, Saudi Arabia, many countries have owned a lot of our treasury bond debt, but they're dumping it over the side of the river like the Boston Tea Party. And so that spells huge trouble for the market. When we see a 10% negative correction on the treasury yield, you're going to see what a lot of us have been waiting for. And we've been seeing with silver. We're seeing it now. I think I told you once we hit $30, it's going to start moving upward. We've seen it go up to 32, as I believe yesterday or the day before. But I think the next markers are $40, $50. When the treasury yield fails and they can't stop it or they won't stop it, you'll start seeing silver at $100, $200. You're going to see gold move up precipitously, which is going to force a lot of these countries to de-dollarize, which they're doing through BRICS now. But more countries who are not yet adopted into BRICS are going to power up their currencies in gold and silver and other natural assets they possess in the ground. So it has a huge significance for the world economy.
What's causing silver and gold to go up apart from the dollar being, devalued?
Well, again, countries have no confidence in the US dollar, so they have plenty of assets. When the market starts tanking and you start seeing the dollar crashing, again, money has to flow somewhere, right? It's not just going to stay stagnant. It's like if water is going downhill, it's not just going to stop. It's going to find its way around the rocks and continue to divert in open places. So what's causing gold and silver to move up is loss of confidence in the dollar, loss of confidence in the treasury yield, and the stock market it's going to find its way into precious metals. This has happened before historically, and now it's repeating itself, but on a much larger scale.
Absolutely. Now, you say also some countries are going to abolish the petrodollar. I'm suspecting they're going to go to the gold standard, and all the countries are going to be following. We have already countries that, if they're going to go back to the gold, and we're not going to be dealing with, petrodollars, fiat currency, that means that, what happens to taxes, because it's outside of that dimension, if you like, of that world of, you earn money, you pay taxes. Well, this is not really their money. This is obviously their money is fake. We earn fake money. We pay them fake taxes.
Right.
But in gold, what happens to taxes? Does that go away as well?
Well, I'll answer that question in a moment, but let me back up to your previous comment, which is important. Excuse me. In 1957, just a quick history lesson, the U.S. bartered a deal with Saudi Arabia to use the petrodollar as a trading instrument for oil. And that has been in place for 67 years. The prince now, I think if I mispronounce it, I apologize. I believe it's Tin Saudi bin Salman, has come out and said that Saudi Arabia is no longer going to be supporting the US dollar, petrodollar, for trades in oil as of June 9th, this next month. That's about 10 days away. So that's a significant demarcation. You take that against the treasury yield we just talked about and what we talked about in gold and silver, and you start to put the pieces together, it becomes much more clear. Now, as for taxes, taxes were always artificial because here in the US, if you're an individual, the IRS cannot produce a single law in the books that shows that individuals have to pay taxes. Hence, we are not corporations. So taxation is theft, it's fraud. And so it never should have existed. The genesis of taxes, Nicholas, goes back to the late teens and early 20s when prohibition was here. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, trade embargoes on liquor and things like that when people were trying to get it into the country, quote, illegally, which should have never happened. They put a excise tax and people were willing to pay it because they wanted the goods. What they did is they started to institutionalize it after 1913 when they created the fake Federal Reserve, which is no more federal, as Greg Manarino says, than Federal Express to the US. It's a foreign British corporation, and it stuck because, people just didn't know, and, it got bullied upon them. So yeah, taxes will absolutely be going away in terms of income tax and whatnot. We'll have to see what other taxes like, excise tax and property tax, what that's going to look like in the future. But as far as the taxes you're talking about, yes, Trump has already talked about abolishing those.
Do we have any countries that have started abolishing them?
Well, we have states here in America that are going gold and asset backed. I I have to go back and look. I think it's 22 states, but don't quote me on that, but it's in that ballpark, who are already using gold and silver as trading instruments, non-taxable. So states are starting that process. Countries, not that I can see officially, but I again, as this wealth transfer rolls out, I think that's just going to be a universal axiom. Because if we're not paying it in America, it builds a strong case to the rest of the world. Why should they? Because as we go, the rest of the world goes.
Absolutely. Did you mention Saudi Arabia?
I did. Yes.
Yeah, great.
So, yeah. Saudi Arabia's basically said no more trading in petrodollar for oil, which, back to your point, means that they're going to have to trade in something else, and they'll be trading going back to the gold standard pre 1971 Nixon. It's just basically a reversal back to the past.
Well, when they do that, will they still keep the currency, that their technological, currency, like their fiat currency? I know it won't be fiat anymore because it will be backed by gold, but
Mm-hmm.
will they still use it as a technology form to transact whilst it's backed by gold?
You talking about Saudi Arabia? I mean,
Saudi Arabia, yeah. The reason
hard
why
to.
I ask, yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
the reason why I ask is because when they revalued, when their currency is backed by gold, how is that going to reflect on their currencies if they still, if they're going to use it? So,
Well, as you said earlier, Nick. Sorry, as you said earlier, gold stabilizes the economy. That's why it's God's money. It's been God's money for thousands of years, and we're just going back to that. It's going to stabilize the U.S. economy. I would surmise that here in the U.S., we're going to have some type of a gold-backed note to replace the federal dollar, which they haven't printed a new one in a few years now, the Federal Reserve note specifically. So I would imagine if we're doing that here in the U.S. with a new gold-backed currency of some type, I would imagine Saudi Arabia would do the same thing. It'll be a transition process, but we're ultimately, to your question, we're going to a new digital economic reality based on hard assets, right? Some people are okay with that. Some people are not. What we always encourage, Nick, on our channel is for people to become their own central bank. Don't just rely on one aspect. Have the right foreign currencies, have the right bonds like Zimbabwe, have cryptos that are ISO 20022 that are asset backed or slated to be. Of course, precious metals, food, water supply. These are all life staples, but they can also be barterability instruments. And I would imagine that they would follow suit as well.
now, Donald Trump mentioned a few days ago about protecting Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in America as a transaction for money and stuff like that. What do you think about that?
I'm not surprised. It's funny how in the beginning, when I say the beginning, a couple of years back, he was ardently against it, and now he's for it. I think personally that was a ruse. I think he always intended to protect it, and the reason he wants to protect it, Nicholas, and you put this on your channel, is because he wants to create a set of decentralization. Right? XRP is a great example. Just because they're on the ISO 20022 blockchain doesn't mean they can't be decentralized. That's why this case that they're going to win is so significant, because it frees them up, but it also takes the monopoly, the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, which is just a corrupt organization like the FBI and the DOJ and the IRS and all the rest of them. They've held this monopoly. When XRP gets broken free, they will be able to decentralize, and people will be able to own them independently, just like Bitcoin or other assets. So I think I'm not surprised, but I think it's an important thing that he said, because it's a clue to the gold standard and the decentralization. I mean, we just saw a case here, Nicholas, where today Bank of America has lost its case. I'm just reading from the article. SCOTUS decision has confirmed that the U.S. has a dual banking system with federal and state chartering. So this is the beginning of decentralizations of banks controlling the monopoly on power on the people. Again, becoming your own central bank. I believe in the future, and within maybe 3+ years, you and I, if we want to do business, we could do it like we do with Zelle, or in your case, Revolut, but we don't have a middleman. We would just trade between each other, basically online bartering.
Absolutely. Now, I was reading into the terms and conditions of, the exchanges where you can buy cryptocurrency, places like Coinbase,
Mm-hmm.
Binance. and other FCA regulated entities like, banks, online banks, Revolut, Starling, all of these online new banks where, you have a sort code or a routing number, an account number, but you can also have a facility on there online where you can buy crypto from that same bank. Now, they're saying that in their regulations and terms and conditions, that when you buy cryptocurrency, that they will be reporting it to the IRS to make sure that you're not money laundering. What's going to happen about that? How can we get out of that? And isn't that invading people's privacy?
Well, of course it is, but that's what they're saying now. But they're going to have to do an about face once Trump is optically back. We know that he's the commander in chief, and you and I know why. So I think this is more of a ploy to show people how those who are still putting information together, because not all of us are at the same learning curve. Some of us learned years ago, decades ago. Some are just learning now. Everybody's in a different place, and I think the Trump team has been very thoughtful in the sense of accommodating people's learning curves, understanding that philosophy. So I think it's really more of a point to show people how corrupt the IRS has always been, and that they never really had to do it. They have to wake people up in a slow, systematic way. I mean, we'd like it to be faster, but we're not in control. So I think by the time he's optically back, that'll get abolished day one, and it'll just be a complete reversal.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the dinars, the Vietnamese dong. I know you don't like to give rates, and I know that, we shouldn't give times because we just don't know. That's the truth. We just don't know when they're going to be, coming out. But people have been waiting for this for a very long time. They knew that they're just printing money, making the dollar so weak, and they've got currency manipulators. The deep state, Federal Reserve, they apply currency manipulators in the Middle East, like Iraq, Vietnam, and many, many other countries, keeping their currencies very low and weak, manipulating them. But these countries are, when they cut off the dollar and they say, well, we're going to go back to gold, what's going to happen to their currencies? Because a lot of people are buying Iraqi dinars, they're buying Vietnamese dong because they believe that they're going to reevaluate to a much higher level, which could make them into millionaires. And this is what we call the transfer of power from the bad guys to the good guys. We could say this is biblical, the Jubilee, as it says in the Bible. Why don't you tell us what you think about that?
That's a very broad, reaching question or comment, but I'll try to be as succinct.
Like, what's the update with it? If you could, intro on that, and then just give us an update with what's happening, how close we are with that happening. I hope that helps.
No, it does. I thought that's where you're going with it, but I just wanted to be sure. I'll try to be as succinct as I can. Okay, so Iraq for years, not unlike the US, because they've been tied to the US dollar like a lot of countries, they're corrupt Iranian proxies within their government, because just like we have a fake administration here in America, they've had one in Iraq, but for much longer. They've had an Iranian-based government, not an Iraqi citizen-based government, so it's been corrupted, right? They have artificially suppressed what they call a programmed rate, a fake rate. They put it on the Forex, and the reason that so many people in the beginning thought it was a scam is because they believed that the rate they saw was the real rate, but it's not. The real rate is in the private sector. The Ministry of Planning is in charge of that. They're starting to become more vocal, to your point about where they are. The good news is Sudani is taking big steps to cut off the US dollar supply in the country, which effect takes the money laundering or severely minimizes it away from the corrupt bad guys, which is making them very angry and frustrated because they're not able to live high on the hog. Basically, Iraq is all done with everything. They've signed everything on their end. It's all the important laws, the taxes and tariffs at the border, all the new roads, the port of Fa, where a lot of goods come in and out of the port of Iraq. The oil and gas law, Article 140, for those who are familiar, all that's been done. It's signed. They play these games like the budget is still being looked at. It's not. They're stalling. It's done. That's a head fake. We're just waiting on Israel to do the part we discussed. Vietnam's a little more interesting because they don't have a financial issue. They have a corruption issue, not unlike the rest of the world with communism, right? But they have a tremendous GDP workforce. Their government came out about a month ago or 3 weeks ago and said that they were going to start actively investing in country resources like silver, like Litecoin, like gold into the Forex market to pump up the dong. So they know, they're anticipating what we talked about earlier, Nick, with the Treasury failure and the US petrodollar going away. They know that's coming. So they're already taking steps to tell you that they're moving away from a fake debt instrument into real assets because they're going to have to power up their currencies. They won't be able to hide anymore. So the whole emperor has no clothes thing is coming off the top. And then you have Zimbabwe, who has, we know, powered up gold-backed dollars under the ZIG with QR codes to stabilize their country's economy. Nelson Chamisa is somebody we need to be watching, speaking of biblical, a very ardent Christian. He's putting out more and more signs about when he's back and what he's going to do. And he's going to tuck the bonds into the ZIG dollars. So it's all one currency backed by gold. China just came out a few weeks ago and invested $300 million in mining stations inside of Zimbabwe. Why? Because they have the metals, right? They have the goods. China has to buy a tremendous amount of gold to get away from the petrodollar. This we know. But there's some other things too. They owe some money, significant monies on bonds they have to pay back to the US, and they need the gold to do that. Like the banks have to have Basel III compliance. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you this, Nick, this just came out today. The EU, the European Union, confirms January 25 for the start of Basel III. Again, for those who are not familiar, Basel III and 4 are compliance rules from Switzerland that banks have to show on the balance sheets how much gold and silver they actually are holding. They can't hold paper gold or silver. It has to be real. And if they don't have the necessary requirements, they're gone. That's why you're going to see a lot of banks failing and going away. You've been seeing it globally. We see a continuation of that. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we are.
Interesting. Now, I want to talk about bank failures. But just before we get into that, I want to tell the people that I've been receiving lots of emails regarding where they can buy Vietnamese and Iraqi dinars and other currencies, because I'm going to leave the link below in there in the description for that. But speaking of bank failures, what would happen when banks fail and they can't lend out money? What would happen to the property market then?
Well, I mean, again, we're going to have a crash, Nick. I believe the big crash will be next year, but we should see a 50% what they call flash crash, which is still technically a crash by stock terminology. In the U.S. stock market, because it's all artificial to begin with. And that has, to your point, a systemic effect. It's already happening in the commercial real estate market. Here in California, we're seeing a lot of businesses go up. I do a weekly wrap up for my audience, and I talk about all the companies that are doing layoffs or just closing up their stores wholesale. So that's already been in process. With respect to the property market, the National Association of Realtors here in America reported in April a 2% drop in home sales, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's going to be a continued effect as the economy of the old economy, the US dollar, fails. You're going to see property values drop dramatically, which sounds bad. Obviously, it's bad for homeowners right now. But when we go to a stable economy, you won't have central banks. You won't have interest rates and inflated debt and all these closing costs and all the nonsense they pile on to make money for their old boy network. So people's houses will hold their value. People will be able to afford houses on one income. You won't have to have, two people working and never seeing their family, which was the design of this whole thing, was to break apart the family oneness and harmony, unity. Yeah. So it'll be like the currencies, a devalue to a revalue. You take a step back to take steps forward.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How about the debt cancellation? When is that really going to happen? Is that something, that's something on the horizon in the future? Does it have to happen?
Yes and yes. It's been happening. I've had people come to me and show me they redact the documents from their bank or the mortgage company, which is a debt company. My credit cards were gone. My mortgage is paid. My medical bills are done. My student loans are gone. Da da da. As banks fail, it's kind of hard for a business when they go out of business to collect on the debt. They just write it off. So yes, those who have not received debt forgiveness will get it. If you paid off your debts, quote unquote, whatever debt is, because we have to ask what is debt. It's artificial. But if you've done that, great. Then use that leverage to improve your position in if you feel led to it, currencies, certainly gold and silver and copper
Yeah.
and other metals and land and other things to become your own central bank. But ostensibly, yes, there will be debt forgiveness for people who haven't experienced it.
I speak about debt forgiveness sometimes, and people are like, "Well, I don't have a property. I mean, what am I? That's not fair." And my answer to them is, it's not a reward for people who have properties.
Right.
This will happen to credit cards, student loans, personal loans. If you bought a car and you've got that on finance, or whatever kind of money you got, because the system is rigged,
Mm-hmm.
the contracts of those loans are null and void. So it's more of a fraudulent activity that needs to be cancelled, as opposed to a reward to the people. So that's how you need to look at it. Um, but John Dowling, it's been an absolute honor to have you on my show. Like always, thank you very, very much. If people want to be part of the wealth transfer, and you're looking to buy dinars and Vietnamese dong, please do have a look at the link below in the description. If it's something that you want to use it to help the world with humanitarian projects, so on. We need good people to get involved. Like Flynn says, I think he says local action makes a national impact.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important. But John, is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Yeah, and thank you again for having me, Nick. It's always a privilege and a pleasure. Just to add to the backs of what you just said, Nick, those who say, "Oh, it's not fair. I didn't experience or I didn't have debt." Well, you don't think you have debt, but if you've paid taxes, if you paid property taxes, if you there's a lot of things, state and excise tax that you get for certain items. You're paying taxes whether you know it or not. There's a lot of hidden taxes and things that were artificially rigged and corrupt. So your debt might not be as obvious as other people's, but you still paid into the system that you shouldn't have had to, and that stuff is going to come back to you. And again, if you're fortuitous and blessed that you don't have any upfront debt that you've mentioned, use it as an opportunity to improve your leverage and to help others in the process.
No, absolutely. I really agree with that. Well, thank you very much, John. And again, we'll speak again very soon. You take care and God bless. Bye bye.
Take care.